Right, it's 2 o'clock, so good afternoon everyone and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies to be noted?
We've received apologies from Councillor Mark Foster and Councillor Peter Elliott, for which we've got substitutes Councillor Stephen Clough and Councillor Pam Jones. And we also have Councillor Helen Weatherall substituting for Councillor Andrew Cooper for the first half of the meeting.
Thank you for that, Amy. The second is declaration of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests and or other interests not already on their register of interest in any item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Do any members have an interest to declare? No, thank you very much, members. Our third item is declaration of predetermination. Any member who cannot determine an application solely on the information presented to the committee at the meeting today is asked to declare that they are predetermined on that item on the agenda and to withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Do any members have any predetermination to declare? Silence I will take as a no. Thank you very much, members. Item 4. We now have the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of April 2025. Are we happy that they are a correct record?
I'll move them, Chair.
Okay, all those in favour, show of hands. Thank you. Any against? Abstentions? Thank you, members. Right, we now move on to item 5, which is the NED/01089/4/FL Morton. The first application is in respect of land to the north of Stretton Road at Morton. I'm now going to hand over to the planning officer to give a brief explanation of the application. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So this is item 1. So this is application reference 23/01089/FL. It's for the installation and operation of a renewable energy generating station comprising of ground-mounted PV solar arrays together with inverter transformer units, battery storage units, control house, substation, on-site grid connection equipment, storage containers, site access, access gates, internal access tracks, security measures, other ancillary infrastructure and landscaping and biodiversity enhancements. And that's at land off Stretton Road at Morton. So the application, as we've had late representations which have been received and are included in the late summary update report which was forwarded to members yesterday, and include comments of a number of local residents, the local MP, Councillor Coupit and the applicant. Members yesterday also attended a virtual site visit which provided a comprehensive photographic record of the site and the surrounding area. I understand that the recording has been shared to any members that couldn't attend yesterday. So officers are of the view that the benefits of the scheme, which are outlined in the officer report, outweigh the landscape harm in this instance, and that therefore there are no technical reasons to refuse the proposed development, and as such officers recommend the application for approval. So this first slide, this illustrates the application site shaded orange. It covers 66 hectares of land to the north of Morton. Clay Cross is off to the north, Pilsley to the northeast, and Mickley to the southwest. You've got the A61 running north to south over on the west hand side of the application site. You've also got the Midland Main Line, which can be seen on the left of that slide. And you can also see 3 existing smaller solar farms just to the north of the application site. So this is more zoomed in plan of the site, with the railway line running north to south east adjacent to the site. You've got woodland to the west and the village of Morton to the south. Averil Farm is located between the site and the solar farm to the north. Access is taken from Stretton Road to the south, which runs through into Morton from the A61. You also have Eversill Lane, which runs through the centre of the application site, with the former colliery tip to the southeast of that slide. So this is the location plan which was submitted with the application. This is the submitted site layout plan. So the blue colour is the extent of the panels proposed. Red is the battery storage unit. Orange is the substation, which will connect the site into the wider grid. The green lines that you can see through the site, that is the proposed hedgerow planting. And the brown is the crushed tracks which will run through the site. So this plan illustrates the application site edged in red in comparison to the 3 other smaller 5 megawatt schemes to the north. So they're edged in green, blue and pink on this plan. In comparison, the application site covers 66 hectares, with the other 3 covering approximately 35 hectares. So this is part of the proposed infrastructure required to connect into the grid, and includes substation, switch room and a connecting mast. And that will connect into an existing pylon which runs through the site. This illustrates one of the battery storage areas. There will be 13 of these across the site, and they contain battery storage, inverters and converters. These will be framed by acoustic fencing. So this is some of the proposed timber post and wire fencing which will frame the site, and you'll have CCTV posts at 3 metres in height every 80 to 120 metres around the perimeter of the site. So this is one of the montages provided by the applicant from a single point along Eversill Lane. It shows at the top of the slide the post-development situation, so once the panels are in, compared to the montage at the bottom of that slide, which is at year 15. So the hedgerows will be grown to about 3 metres in height. So this montage is taken from further south along Eversill Lane, close to existing housing. You've got post-completion at the top of the screen. And at the bottom you can see year 15 with the hedgerows grown a little higher. This final montage is taken from Stretton Road to the south, again post-completion at the top and with year 15 at the bottom. So this is a handy cross-section, and it illustrates 2 points along Eversill Lane, which crosses the application site from north to south. The plan highlights the separation of the proposed panels from the right-of-way by a minimum of 10 metres to the east and west, apart from a section to the north close to the substation site, which will be set back a minimum of 20 metres from the right-of-way. So this shows how the applicant has sought to incorporate new hedgerow planting into the scheme to replace lost historic hedgerow lines. The 1918 plan on the left-hand side, and you've got the proposed hedgerow planting highlighted with arrows and the green lines on the right-hand side. So this is a plan provided by the DCC landfill team, which illustrates the location of Morton Tip edged in red to the south of Stretton Road. You've got the former Morton landfill site known as the Range edged in orange, and that is now established woodland. And you've also got the former colliery edged in green down to the southeast. So I've included a few photos in the presentation from yesterday's virtual site visit, including this one, which is a view looking north along Eversill Lane. You can see Averil Farm on the back left. This photo was taken last week, and as you can see, the hedgerows have been reduced to approximately 1 metre in height. The proposal intends to grow them up to 3 metres in this location, and development will consist of on both sides of this part of Eversill Lane. So this is a view northwest with Averell Farm on the left, and the existing solar farm can just be seen to the right hand side of the farm. And the pylon that you can see on the right hand side of this photo will be used to connect the proposed development into the wider grid. So this is an elevated view from the former Morton Colliery looking northwest across the application site, and you can see Averell Farm and the existing 5 megawatt solar farm just in the background there. And this final photo is taken from the A61 looking back east towards the application site. The red arrow illustrates the approximate location of part of the application site that will be visible from this point. And that concludes the presentation, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you for that. We have 8 registered speakers on this application. The first of which is a local ward member, Councillor Kevin Gillett. If you'd like to come up to the speakers table, Kevin. You have 3 minutes whenever you're ready. Sorry, Kevin, they've already put your microphone on.
Thank you, Chair. The residents of Morton that I'm here to represent aren't opposing this application because they're NIMBYs or they deny the importance of green energy. They're opposing this application because they are convinced, and I'm convinced, that it doesn't comply with the Council's own planning policies because of the harm it would do to the local landscape and amenity, which outweighs any benefit of the renewable energy it will generate. The fact that this site will provide benefit is not in doubt, nor is it in doubt that it will cause harm. The relevant policies, as spelt out in the report, are quite clear. SS9 deals with development in the countryside and requires development in the countryside to respect the scale and character of the landscape. This application does neither. It is huge and will dominate this area, which is only a minute's walk from the houses on Evershaw Lane. SDC3 landscape permits new development, but only where it would not cause significant harm to the character, quality, distinctiveness or sensitivity of the landscape. This application will cause significant harm to the landscape, while SDC 10 deals with renewable energy and permits development, but only where there would be no significant adverse effects on either the visual amenity and character of the landscape or the amenity of local residents. This application has significant adverse effects on the character of the landscape and the amenity. And it's not just me saying that. The report makes quite clear, and this is just a flavour of what's contained in the report. The proposal will cause harm to the character, quality, distinctiveness and tranquillity of the immediate landscape. It is not compatible with policies SDC 3 and 10. Throughout the report, it uses words like major and moderate impact on the landscape. It does, however, go on to say that the benefit outweighs the harm. But does it? That is the subjective judgment you as committee members have to make today. Just because national and local planning policies support applications for renewable energy sources doesn't mean that every application has to be granted. Each has to be judged on its merits, and a committee can say no. I want to conclude by throwing out a challenge to the committee and ask that you actually visit the site before you make your final decision. The photographs and maps that you've seen today do not convey the scale of the site or the damage and harm it would cause. If you walk down Evershaw Lane and see the site's proximity to the housing and how it will dominate the landscape, changing it from rolling coalfield farmland looking towards Claycross into a sea of solar panels hidden from view by a new hedge. A hedge that obscures that view and amenity for anyone using the path. Go to the top of the old colliery tip and look down on the site to see the sheer scale of the area under consideration and how it would change the landscape in that area,
30 seconds.
turning Morton into a solar farm with a village attached. I reiterate what I stated at the beginning. There is a balance to be struck, and this proposal has that balance wrong. The significant harm it would cause to Morton and its countryside outweighs the benefit, and so the application should be refused.
Thank you, Councillor Gillett. Do any members have any questions for Councillor Gillett? No? I've got one for you, Kevin, actually. You mentioned there's several policies that you don't think it meets the criteria of. Is there any particular one of them that you would like to expand on?
Three, and Chair, I think this is ultimately it's a subjective judgment each and every member has to make. The view of the officers on this is not a technical view, I don't think, and you might want to clarify that with them. It's for you to decide whether the harm exceeds the benefit, and your view, therefore, is as balanced as that, is as important as that of the officers who are advising you. And certainly, when you look through the report, there are others, not just me and not just residents, saying that there's damage involved here. If I can find it, I think, for example, where is it? Yeah, that's it. The Derbyshire Rights of Way officer, I think, states, if I can find it, there's a negative impact on the amenity. The Ramblers Association say it will have considerable deleterious effect on the pleasant views over the farmland that will be lost and replaced by what is described as row after row of unsightly panels, high fences and associated support buildings. And similarly, the British Horse Association makes similar comments. Now their wording used by lay people, not by planning officers, but they're all saying the same thing. Significant harm is caused by this application. And so I think that gives you the grounds, if you accept that assessment, to follow each of those three grounds, those three policies that I've outlined, and say no, it's not appropriate to grant this application today.
Thank you. Just one last question. But obviously, there's already panels within the area. Have you got any comments on the cumulative effect of this?
Thank you. Thinking about it, if I recollect from the report, the officer's recommendation is that there's no cumulative impact. But I also think the County Council report that's before you today, as well summarised in the report, says there is a cumulative impact. So again, that shows that professional people approaching it with the same standards and the same policy are reaching different conclusions. And if I'm right in that assessment, that means you can reach a different conclusion to that of your officers as well today. And again, the best way to judge the cumulative impact of the existing farms, particularly the one that abuts this application, is to go and have a look. Because the maps you've seen today and the photos you've seen today, I can tell you here and now, do not convey the sheer scale of that or the impact and the harm it will have on that countryside and landscape.
Thank you, Councillor Gillett. No further questions? If you'd like to retake your seat. Right, next up is Councillor Cooper. Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
3 minutes when you're ready, Andrew.
Afternoon, Chair and members. This afternoon, you've been asked to consider an application to install a solar farm of immense proportions, 66 hectares in size, which equates approximately to 160 football pitches. This added to 3 adjacent solar farms already in existence, which total approximately another 80 football pitches. This undoubtedly will dramatically change the landscape of this lovely area. Morton is a small village which is slowly being surrounded by solar panels. And if you need any proof of this, then you need to visit the village and look from the top of Morton Tip. The views are stunning, but approving this development will mean that the views are changed dramatically and certainly not for the better, in my opinion. The already in existence solar farms, which can be seen in the distance from this point, will be joined by this new solar farm, and cumulatively the effect on the landscape will be massive and will be contrary to policy SDC 10. In policy SDC 3 of the local plan at point 1 it states proposals for new development will only be permitted where they would not cause significant harm to the character, quality, distinctiveness or sensitivity of the landscape or to important features or views. Well, I'd have to say that this development would affect all these things. Last month, at Planning Committee, members debated another solar farm at Wingworth. After lengthy debate, that application was passed, but I would have to say that this application is on a totally different scale. I asked members this question: what benefit is this development for Morton, its residents, and the visitors to the village? Will Morton residents benefit directly by cheaper electricity bills? I probably doubt it. So why would Morton residents be happy to lose the countryside and fabulous views on their doorstep to an additional 66 hectares of metal and glass? On balance, and as much as I am in favour of clean energy, it shouldn't be at the expense of ruining our countryside and the environment that we're trying to protect. So I would urge members to refuse this application today.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Do any members have any questions? No, if you'd like to retake your seat then. Thank you, Andrew. The next speaker is Neil Radford from Morton Parish Council. If you'd like to take your seat, Neil. You have 3 minutes when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Committee. I want to begin by reaffirming that our community supports renewable energy. In fact, my own home has had solar panels since 2015. But this proposal, a 49.9 megawatt industrial scale solar farm, is a fundamentally wrong fit for our village of Morton. The sheer scale has already been mentioned of this development, covering, I'm in old money, 163 acres, which is more than 17% of our parish. 17%. It would irreversibly alter the rural character of Morton. This is not a modest renewable project. It's an industrial intrusion into cherished open countryside, which has been successfully farmed for decades. Your own local plan policies have been mentioned that require developments to protect rural landscapes, visual amenity and tranquility. This proposal clearly fails on all those fronts. Even the independent impact assessment acknowledges a major adverse effect, even after mitigation. The applicant's original suggestion of only minor adverse impact fails to recognise the transitional, vulnerable nature of this landscape, especially along Eversham Lane, which provides the only accessible open countryside for villagers on foot and, more importantly, by wheelchair. While new edging is proposed, it simply cannot conceal a development of this scale, especially when viewed from higher ground, as has been mentioned of the pit tip, the nature trail. Hedges tall enough to screen 3-metre high panels would themselves be visually out of place and would obscure this historic pattern of small fields that defines our coalfield village farmland. The developers plan to install multiple inverters across the site which would emit continuous humming sound, especially on sunny days when people are most likely to be outdoors, and it'll add clear audible intrusion to the already severe visual impact. Morton already hosts a 5 megawatt solar farm, and if approved, the proposal would raise the total to 54.9 megawatts, shifting the identity of our village from a peaceful rural community to an industrial solar zone. That's not a fair proportionate burden we should be enforced to live with. The visual amenity of the landscape, the local tranquility and community identity is unacceptable. Derbyshire has already contributed significantly to the national solar infrastructure, and let's be clear, there is no national obligation to approve every farm, especially when it outweighs the benefits. Lastly, 40 years is a lifetime, and for many residents to accept this level of harm for such a long period of time would be a serious injustice for the community to endure. Planning must weigh benefit against harm. In this case, the harms to our landscape, our way of life and our environment are simply too great. I'd like to propose to the committee to imagine this on their doorsteps.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Do any members have any questions? Yeah, Councillor Rath.
afternoon, Mr Redford. Could you tell me when it was last farmed, the land was last farmed?
Well, the farmer was evicted in February.
This year?
Yes. Up until then, he had planted fields in preparation for this year's crops. But because of the proposal, his tenancy was terminated by the landowner, purposely to allow this to go ahead. Otherwise, I'm sure he would have still been there. And he's an award-winning farmer who's won 2 farming awards on that land. Previously, it was a dairy farm. There is a question about the what's it called? The grading of the land is grade 4, whereas it is not. It is grade 3 or 3B. But again, I haven't got the evidence in front of me here to prove that. But yeah.
You know, with regard to the 17%, so you're saying this solar farm will cover 17% of the parish total. Is there any other, so out of the other 3 farms that are already there, solar farms, is there just the one in the parish?
Just the one.
Inside
Which
the
abuts
parish
this
boundary?
one, yes, which will be joining this one almost field to field.
So the other 2 aren't
There's
in the parish
yes,
boundary?
yeah. One's more or less in Danesmore area, but the other one is the other side of the railway, which I believe is in Morton Parish, but not connected.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Redford.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right, the next speaker is Sarah Barraclough, please. You have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Okay,
Thank you.
This proposed site spans either side of the most popular and well-loved and used footpath in the village, which runs from the end of Eversill Lane to the railway bridge and over to Padley Woods and Pilsley. This path is the only flat and easily accessible path to all, i.e. young, old, people with disabilities and children in pushchairs. Villagers regularly walk this path to the railway bridge and back as it is so easily accessible and gives an amazing sense of being out in the middle of the countryside without having to leave the village or get into a car and drive elsewhere. These fields are part of our village and our rural heritage. Filling them with solar panels of metal and glass would to all intents and purposes signal the de facto loss of this footpath. It would be like walking down a soulless corridor between industrial premises and would have a massive detrimental effect on the village landscape and the health and well-being of the residents. This path is our chance to get out into the countryside that remains on our doorstep and clear our heads and enjoy the sounds, sights and smells of wildlife and the countryside within which we have all chosen to live. We do this before and after work and school, and we meet each other on the path with our children and dogs and chat and enjoy the rural surroundings. The effective loss of this much-loved public amenity is too high a price to pay for our village at the expense of a private enterprise. On a similar vein, we villagers walk up the hill onto the Morton pit tip, which is a scar on the landscape reminding of us Morton's previous industrial past, i.e. our mining heritage. The payoff for the residents today is that we can stand at the top of the tip, next to the memorial bench to the miners of the village, and look out across the vast swathes of beautiful countryside that was once open cast. The view is breathtaking, a sea of different shades of green and yellow, depending on the crops and the seasons, as far as the eye can see. I wish you could have had a site visit and come to see and experience it for yourselves to see what we stand to lose. When my daughter was little, she would say it is like being on top of the world. The thought of being up there and looking out and instead seeing a sea of glass and metal solar panels is heartbreaking. The pit tip and the views of the previous open cast is part of our village's heritage that we value for what it now provides us and how it enriches our environment and again adds to our health and well-being. The solar farm would irreparably damage the character of our landscape and decimate the countryside views, which are a much-loved village asset, and again would effectively be a loss of a valuable public amenity. To conclude, I believe that this proposed site in Morton is wholly detrimental to the village and the residents, and I'm sure that there are far more suitable sites available elsewhere. I urge the Planning Committee to please listen to the voices of the vast numbers of residents of such a small village who have made their objections. This is being done to us and our environment against our wishes and will have such a damaging and devastating impact on current and future generations and change our landscape forever. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that. Does any member have any questions for the speaker? No, if you'd like to retake your seat, thank you. Right, the next speaker on this item is Rebecca Spackman. If you'd like to come up and take your seat, please. You have 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Large solar arrays transform natural vistas into industrialised zones dominated by reflective panels, metal framing and security fencing. The thermal and reflective properties of solar farms makes them stand out starkly against their surroundings, disturbing the balance of natural environment that gives the onlooker a sense of beauty. Landscape beauty can be understood in terms of high-quality natural spaces, which are better for us and our well-being according to the Mental Health Foundation. Quality in this sense is defined as meaning higher biodiversity. Avil Farm is an excellent example of mixed-use arable and crop farmland that has sought to encourage biodiversity through a variety of means. From the 12th of February 2024, a mandatory condition on every non-exempt planning permission granted under Part 3 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 requires the provision of at least 10% biodiversity net gain for at least 30 years. We have witnessed multiple protected species on the site, such as roe deer grazing on the farmland, apex predators such as barn owls that nest in the farm buildings, rough-eared owls seen hunting on the farmland, little owls hunting over the harvested cropland, bats, badgers, grass snakes, red foxes, hedgehogs and buzzards. These are apex predators, and their presence is a good indicator of the health of biodiversity in lowland areas and farmland. The faunal biodiversity of the site cannot fail, therefore, to decrease with the removal of seasonal habitats that are only created by mixed arable and crop farming. There is no information available on the impact of solar farms on little owl populations, with one of the main threats being habitat loss, and one of the key conservation strategies for improving little owl populations is growing agricultural crops. They also hunt around small orchards, another habitat found on Avil Farm at the rear of the farmhouse. Within the past year, we have witnessed a lesser kestrel, red kites, and a pair of lapwings demonstrating nesting behaviour, a species on the conservation red list. The site also boasts a pond as well as many bird and bat boxes. Pollinator-friendly crops have attracted a swarm of honeybees, which has settled in a large tree on the boundary of the site. Bees serve as a crucial biodiversity indicator because they respond quickly to environmental changes, interact with diverse flora, fauna, and also the three realms of environment, land, water, and soil, and reflect habitat quality and landscape connectivity. Achieving biodiversity net gain of 10% whilst also maintaining suitable habitats across the farmland for the species that hunt, nest, forage and travel across the land using the existing hedgerows and conservation buffers would be all but impossible. According to the indicator species present, this land is not to be considered intensively farmed, does not suffer from the excessive use of pesticides and fertilisers, or of soil erosion and habitat loss. There are very few, if any, opportunities to increase biodiversity where this land approves for use for solar installation, but at great loss to our beautiful landscape. And if it were to go ahead, and if any of this did remain, we wouldn't be able to see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions for the speaker? No. If you'd like to retake your seat, thank you. The next speaker is Eddie White, please. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you.
When you're ready.
Afternoon.
Thank you.
When the initial application was submitted, an off-site water runoff survey had been completed, within which the water runoff via a large-scale settlement pond and drain to the River Rother had been completely omitted. I advised the planners and spoke to the expert who had done this survey from behind his desk. He in particular seemed to be totally unaware that the land bordering the farm, and now under the woodland, was previously a toxic waste dump in the 1970s. The Derbyshire County Council have apparently lost all documentation showing what went into that site. However, I've got a lot of documents including the original waste disposal licence. Of most concern is all the dioxin waste that went in there from the coalite accident, and also waste that was allegedly imported to be buried at Morton. Some of this waste was so dangerous, it's believed that the lorries it arrived in were actually buried with it. Has a robust environmental assessment been conducted, considering what would happen if knocking 75,000 posts into the neighbouring fields or changing how the water runoff from the site starts to bring toxic waste to the surface and therefore into the River Rother. The toxic waste is public knowledge, so any risk assessment needs to be ensured against it, as a clean-up operation to that extent could run into hundreds of millions of pounds. The site was referred to at the time as a ticking time bomb and was discussed in Parliament on several occasions. The toxic waste aspect danger needs to be considered under conditions 6, 7, 8, 13, 14 and 16 as a minimum. You touched on the farmland aspect of what you saw. The pictures where you see the panoramic yellow fields are because they are currently sown with oilseed rape. The farmer didn't know he was going to be evicted and therefore had planted crops with a view to harvesting this year. He's won 2 national arable farming awards on that land that is being presented to you guys as being poor quality farming. I've lived in Morton most of my life, getting on for 60 years. That farm's always been productive. I've helped out on that farm harvesting crops over the years. It's been productive for as long as anybody can possibly remember. He'd invested thousands of pounds into that farm thinking he was stopping forever
30 seconds.
and was winning national awards. So you really need to consider, if you're being swayed in the slightest by this is a better use of poor quality farming land, I can assure you it isn't.
Thank you. Have you finished? Yeah. Any members got any questions for the speaker? No. Thank you very much. If you'd like to retake your seat. Thanks. The next speaker on this application is Ben Kwok, the applicant. If you'd like to come up to the seat. Speaker's seat. Thank you. You have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. Dear Chairman and Councillors, my name is Ben Kwok and I'm a Development Project Manager for RWE, who acquired JBM Solar in 2023. RWE is one of the UK's largest electricity generators. We are here today against a backdrop of unprecedented change. Year on year, climate records are being broken and the planet is warming. Species loss and decline is clear to see. Geopolitical tension and conflict highlight the fragility of systems such as our energy markets, which we take for granted. The Eden Meadows Solar Farm would produce the equivalent annual electricity needs of approximately 19,400 Derbyshire homes. This is 42% of the entirety of the North East Derbyshire area. As well as the ability to generate clean electricity, the site proposes battery energy storage, which would be charged from the solar panels and exported to the grid when required. This is a significant contribution to regional and national net zero targets for decarbonising the electricity network, as well as enhancing stability of supply in alignment with the government's energy security strategy. The project is also set to deliver ecological enhancements through new wildflower and grass and meadow, resulting in considerable wildlife benefits, culminating in an 89% biodiversity net gain in habitats, almost 9 times the national requirement. The project will deliver no less than 2.7 kilometres of new hedgerow planting, over 150 new trees, and softer benefits such as permitted paths and areas of open space. Over its 40-year lifetime, the project will provide around £6 million of business rates direct to the council, as well as providing direct and indirect employment opportunities during the construction and operation of the site. RWE has a secured grid connection to enable the site to export electricity from next year, with a point of connection within the site boundary. The scarcity of a secured and imminent connection weighs heavily in favour of the project and should be assessed in tandem with the renewable energy benefits. With the new government, we are at a juncture whereby the national mandate and push towards a secure and clean electrical system could not be clearer. The National Planning Policy Framework and National Policy Statements have been strengthened to allow for the maximum deployment of solar technology. Additional government publications, such as the Clean Power 2030 targets, are a material consideration and highlight the need to deliver renewable projects at scale and at speed. This project is capable of contributing towards a once-in-a-generation shift towards clean power. The project has received some local opposition, which is regrettable. However, subject to a planning consent, we will endeavour to continue to work with the local community during the construction and operation of the site. This includes to address concerns regarding contaminated land from the historic landfill. We are also proposing a community benefit fund of around £660,000 for the project. The project has not had a single objection from any statutory consultee apart from the Parish Council. We have worked with the officers alongside our technical teams and planning barrister to refine the project, and we believe in front of you today is a well-considered scheme. The scheme presents a unique opportunity to deliver significant benefits whilst aligning with the government's ambition for a clean power future, and I would therefore urge you to support your officer's recommendation in approving this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Does any members have any questions? Oh, there we go. Councillor Liggett first.
Were you aware of the FBI investigation into so-called kill switch on solar farms?
Yes, I have seen the media circulating around this. I think what's clear from what has transpired so far is that there is no definitive evidence of this. It is an investigation. RWE and our supply chains are secure. They are transparent. The actual media articles you were referring to were regarding inverters being manufactured in China, which had kill switches put inside them. What we have put forward as part of the planning application are reference inverters that we would be procuring as part of the project, which are German inverters, and therefore subject to different quality controls. So I do not believe this is kind of a material consideration for the projects before you today.
Right, thank you. Councillor Clough.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, Ben. I've just got a couple of questions. One is relating to the battery storage, and I noticed the fire brigade have not made any comments. However, battery storage across the country has been known to catch fire, and the fire brigades generally just stand back and watch them burn because they don't know what to do with them if effectively. I noticed on this application that the battery storage is not just in one place, it's across the site. What mitigations will be in place to prevent that fire from travelling elsewhere across the site?
Yeah, of course. I might have to break up that question because, as you can appreciate, there's quite a lot of different avenues to go down there. If I could first take the question in terms of incidence rates and likelihood or propensity for a battery to catch fire. So what we are aware of at the moment is one operational utility scale battery that has caught fire over the past 20 years. This was one site in Carnegie in Liverpool in 2020. Now, batteries have been part of the energy system for 20 years, and there are about 110 units which have been operational since then. Looking outwards, that is about 560 years of operation. To take that as a failure per year, it is about 0.0000001% of all batteries which have caught fire. Often what you see in the media is reference to the similar type of technology, lithium-ion batteries, which are catching fire, without the mitigation measures and the protocols that are put in place for utility-scale batteries as we were proposing for the Eden Meadow Solar Farm. So to touch upon that, we submitted an outline battery safety management plan, which gives the high-level principles and details for the technical considerations around the batteries. As you say, the Fire and Rescue Service provided no objection to that, but I note the comment that sometimes they don't have the capacity to provide meaningful comments. Regardless of that, what we are looking at is, I suppose, to split it again into two parts. The Battery Safety Management Plan looks at the direct design principles to ensure that the batteries are safe, and then they look at the technology within the batteries themselves to ensure safety. We are in alignment with all of the national guidance, the National Fire Chief Council, but also through virtue of us being owner and operators of these sites, we also have to adhere to standards much higher than what is currently mandatable across national levels. So we also adhere to NFPA standards, which are American standards, which have a much more mature battery system than we do. To take a step backwards in terms of the design, as you noted, these batteries are spread out across the site. The reason for that is that they are DC-DC connected rather than AC-DC connected, as is typical across other. By spreading them further apart, it also limits the propensity for a fire to catch between units. We have a 3-metre buffer between the actual physical units themselves, which is policy compliant, and then within the units themselves, we have a number of measures such as HVAC, so air conditioned cooling, a battery management system, which essentially monitors each individual cell of each unit to ensure that if there are any variations of temperature, they're shut down immediately. Aerosol suppression within that, and then other venting mechanisms to ensure that they don't catch fire. Now, that is one of the reasons why instances of utility-scale batteries fires are so rare. It's because they have to adhere to a wealth of different international regulations, far beyond what you might see, for example, in an electric car, which have had instances of fires.
Thank you for that. The second part of the question was related to the actual farmhouse. Sure. On the drawing, it looks like it's totally encased and there'll be no access to the property. Does that mean the farmhouse will never be able to be used again?
No, that is not the case. So there has also been some discussion today around the relevancy of the tenant farmer that was previously there. That was a termination of the tenancy of 5 years up to that point. There were commercial reasons for why that had come about. It wasn't necessarily just for the imposition of the solar farm. There is obviously around the Averell farm, there are outbuildings as well which could have been used. Again, that is a discussion between the landowner and the tenant farmer, of which is not for me to comment on. The actual Averell farm is viable for use. It still can be used as a residential property.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Right, Christine, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Can you comment on the level of noise you'd get from a solar farm like this?
Yes, of course I can. So as part of the planning application, we submitted a noise impact assessment. Now that looks at all of the noise emanating, so noise generating parts of equipment for the site. Principally, that's the batteries, the inverters and the substation. Now, we submitted that and the Environmental Health Officer have come back in agreement with this noise assessment, but in broad senses, what it shows is that there is on a technical term, a no observable adverse effect level, so a NOAL, a low impact. But what that means in more, I suppose, digestible terms is that the impact and increase of noise is around 2 to 3 decibels to any noise-sensitive receptors at a worst case across what is currently seen on background levels. To put that into some further perspective, the predicted noise levels are around 33, 34 decibels. The Chartered Institute for Noise has that equivalency as a whisper, and obviously the scale is logarithmic, so as you go up one, it doubles in intensity and noise. So if that's helpful, if there are any further clarifications with regards to noise.
I'd like to ask another question, is that okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Can I also ask, why is it better to have a solar farm than, say, putting solar panels on houses and industrial units?
Yeah, sure. I don't think they're actually in contention. I think that both should be pushed forward at any one point in time. As I mentioned in my speech, what we have in front of us today is an exceptional mandate from the government to put forward as much utility scale renewables as possible. Studies have shown that the ability or the likelihood of housing and commercial being able to meet the energy demand in itself would not fill the gap for what we need, and hence that's why the push is there for all types of renewables, offshore wind, onshore wind and solar, such as HIP before you today. To put that again in some perspective, I mentioned it in my speech, the Clean Power 2030 targets, which were released in December of last year. At the moment, across the UK, there are 15 gigawatts of installed solar capacity. The target is for 45 to 47 gigawatts by 2030. Now, that is 5 years' time, and as the council and the committee members will appreciate,
Mr. Galt, I think members are aware of that already, because you're not the first solar farm
of course,
that we've had application for.
Yep.
So,
thank you.
can I move on to Councillor Weatherall, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question really is about the scale of this project. So there's no doubt from the report that's been presented that planning policies are going to be contravened and that there will be damage to the environment. That's made clear through the report. The National Planning Policy Framework, again quoting from the report, states that even small-scale projects provide a valuable contribution to significant cutting of greenhouse gas emissions. So my question is, and of course, what is in contention here is the scale and the balance of that versus environmental impact. Yep. My question is, why does it have to be so big? Is it about profit?
No, is the very short answer to that. As I outlined previously, the project would deliver around 42% of the entirety of the energy demand for North East Derbyshire. It is a project which can come forward and connect as of next year. I mentioned in my speech the imminent and scarcity of a grid connection is something that is driving wholesale electrical reform. It is a priority for the government to push forward on, But if I could take a step backwards and talk about the landscape harms, if that's, I think that's a tangent to the question that was put forward to me. The site before you today has no national designations. It is not within a primary or secondary AMES area. There are potential close use in the Quarry and Evershall estate, but what is in front of you and as part of the officer's report are essentially three separate individual accounts of the landscape harm. There's an account of landscape harm from the landscape architect ADAS, who was prepared on behalf of the applicant. You have an application of the Derbyshire County Council, Chartered Landscape Architect, and then you have Influence, who were employed by the council as a third-party landscape consultant. What is clear is that there is a difference in opinion between the ADAS report and the Influence report. But what is also clear is that the actual difference in opinion is only minor. Minor in terms of whether the effect is significant or not, but in terms of the scale, they are very, very close to each other. We accept that there will be moderate levels of harm across three different receptor groups, so the landscape character area, the public right-of-way,
Can I just
and the
correct
use
you?
of Quarry.
It says major to moderate. It doesn't just say moderate.
Residual effect, so after year 15, it would be not significant. Am I okay to continue, Chair?
Yeah, continue.
Derbyshire County Council say very clearly in paragraph 2.32 of their response, large fields enclosed by clipped hedgerows would be unlikely to assess as having significant landscape sensitivity. They recognise in paragraph 2.33 that the Derbyshire Renewable Energy Study, it is a low landscape sensitivity. Now, I'm again very clear that this council have dealt with solar applications. They have looked at this renewable energy study before. They will be familiar with the map which shows the areas of Derbyshire which are judged to be low, medium or high sensitivity. Those low areas would, at a guess, be around 3% of the entirety of Derbyshire. This site falls within that area. Now, I appreciate in its own right, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to have a low landscape harm. But this is the backdrop to the reasons why we're here today. Finally, in terms of the Derbyshire County Council response, at paragraph 2.33, they suggest that it will be surprisingly contained visually so that only those people living close to the site and using footpaths would have a view. If I move on to the comments from Influence.
Are you summing them?
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, of course. If I move on to the comments from Influence, their most recent responses, which were uploaded to the portal yesterday, which were from last month, suggest that the only significant impact they're concerned on is the impact on the public rights-of-way. And we believe that the public and renewable energy benefits, alongside the environmental benefits, far surpass and outweigh that harm.
Thank you. Do we have any? Oh, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Kwok, I'm very well familiar with the background on solar farms, so thank you very much for the second lesson. I'm more concerned about the impact on the community at large, okay? Yep. So I'd like to direct you to a soft issue. As a large international corporation, you have corporate responsibility.
Correct, yeah.
Okay? Now, could you clarify for me the scope and the basis of any valuation of any community benefit fund that you will negotiate with the village following approval of this application, if it is approved?
Yes, of course, Councillor. As you'll be aware, there is no mandate or requirement to deliver a community benefit fund, but regardless of that, we believe that in coming into local communities and through the construction period, it is only right that we offer some kind of support to that local area. Now, we have arrived at a sum of £660,000.
Can you keep this brief? Yeah. Because we know this isn't a material consideration. Okay, so please keep this brief. Okay.
Sure. We have a dedicated community benefit fund, which tried to administer the funds to ensure they provide value across the area, and we have arrived at the fund of £660,000 for the project.
Any further questions?
Yes,
yes, Councillor Beatson.
How long is that fund for?
That is for 40 years.
So that is 660,000 spread over 40 years.
So again, because it's not a material planning consideration, we have proposed the value of the fund, but any subsequent discussions would be after a consent is either gained or not. And that would in terms of what that money might be used for and the likes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so it's only 16,000 a year.
Yes, correct, yeah.
Right, okay, thank you.
Did you want to speak, Councillor Cheetham? I
Mr. Kwok, whether you had any specific response to the previous speaker, Mr. White's comments regarding toxic waste. Forgive me, I think you mentioned it in your sort of initial presentation.
Yes, of course. So we are aware that there are former landfill areas surrounding the site, and we're grateful for the Environmental Health Officer and the DCC landfill team to support the project in providing a no objection subject to conditions. Now, part of my role is to also look at what we can do to ameliorate concerns from the local community. And as you heard from the speaker before me, they believe that there is a contention that they do not know what is underneath the soil. So we have the licence wording, we know what was licensed to be able to be left there. What we will be doing is undertaking intrusive works, particularly around the boundaries of the site, to ensure that there is no risk further downstream in terms of drainage, but also to human receptors from any piling or any additional construction works.
Right, thank you. Any further questions? No, if you'd like to retake your seat. Thank you
very much.
Right, the final speaker on this application is Kenny Dillon, the agent. If you'd like to take your seat, please. You have 3 minutes when you're ready, please.
Is this on?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, my name is Kenny Dillon, Planning Director at Inzygo. I have worked on this project for the last 5 years with our client RWE. I've been a town planner for 25 years, having worked in local government, as a planning advisor for National Farmers Union, and now in the private sector. I'm proud to be working on this scheme, which I consider is a great example of a well-designed and cited scheme. This planning application was submitted in December 2023, and prior to that date, we had engaged with the council for the pre-application stage. I myself have worked on solar schemes for over 10 years across the country, and from my experience, this site itself lends itself very well for the Pro Solar and BAS project. I say this as the site is not located within a designated or a protected landscape, is not in the green belt. It's an area of the district which a study by Derbyshire County Council considers to be the least constrained for solar development, such as this. No such consultees are objected to our scheme. The County Council, in their response to this planning application, agreed that the site is well contained in a low-lying position, that the site is surprisingly well screened. They conclude that the site can be supported in principle. Following independent landscape advice received by the Council, we have amended the scheme. We've reduced the scale of the solar farm by increasing the buffer distances between the site and the public rights-of-way by at least 21 metres from fence to fence at the nearest point in Eversall Lane, widening to 45 metres fence to fence along the public right-of-way. We've also introduced a further 2.7 kilometres of hedgerow planting to screen any direct views of the development, which also helps to deliver a significant and long-term BNG of 17.89% for hedgerow units and an incredible 89.78% net gain in habitat units for the overall landscaping scheme and the management of a solar farm after construction. Furthermore, the solar and the BES development is not a permanent form of development and will be situated within the existing part of the landscape. There will be no net loss of agricultural land, especially that livestock can graze beneath the panels. The land on which the scheme will be sited on is considered not to be BMV land. It has 37%, which is grade 3B, which is not BMV, and 63% of the land is grade 4. Therefore, a solar farm will not lead to the loss of the best and most versatile agricultural land. We recognise it has been used as productive land. However, the need for renewable energy is also pressing. The biggest threat to nature and food security and to rural communities is not solar panels or onshore wind. It is indeed climate change, which this scheme will tackle. Climate change threatens the UK's best farmland, food production and the livelihoods of farmers. It is also important to state that the development is policy compliant both locally and at a national level. The government, indeed a Labour government, is fully supportive of ground-mounted solar farms across the UK, and the energy security policy specifically mentions low medium grade agricultural land, which this site falls under, to be favoured over higher agricultural land. And also, I'll add in 14 seconds, we also are proposing 1.7 acres of land for community use as well.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Weatherall.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. We have in the report 11 pages of conditions listed. How can this committee be assured on those conditions that they will be delivered? That's the first question. The second is, what monitoring do you understand will take place to ensure that those conditions are delivered? And what recompense might the community seek if these are not adhered to? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Weatherall. First and foremost, the planning conditions will be enforced by the council, so it will be your officers who will enforce them. The development cannot go ahead until those conditions have been discharged properly and thoroughly and in accordance with your officers' guidance and advice, and also the advice and guidance from consultees. So all the reporting that we will undertake will be reviewed and tested, with your officers and also with Derbyshire County Council as well, and any of the consultees who fed into those planning conditions. And those conditions and the reporting will be submitted to the council for their review and for their approval. And the site cannot be developed if those conditions have not been discharged adequately or sufficiently. Furthermore, the discharge of those conditions when it comes to building the site, it will be subject to sort of legislation as well, with regards to health and safety, but also what has been approved by the council when those conditions were discharged. So it will be fully auditable and, sort of fully, no one can cut corners in discharging any of those planning conditions because they will be enforced by the council and your officers and Derbyshire County Council, and also parallel legislation with regards to the law as well.
Any further questions for the speaker? No, if you'd like to retake your seat then, please. Right then, members, it's now time to ask any questions of officers. Councillor Rouse.
Hi, Graham. I think it's you. Yeah. Have you had any discussions at all with the applicants regarding the reduction in size?
Thanks, Councillor Rouse. So, yes, the application, as you know, has been in for nearly a couple of years. So we've had several kind of calls, and we've also had a meeting with our landscape architect and the experts on the applicant side, and we did put forward some amendments, and the scheme that is before us today is what has been submitted. So that is what we are considering today.
Councillor Jones.
Mr Cooper, when you looked at the harm versus the benefit balance, obviously the size of that solar farm is a major issue. Did you consider at all the fact that with 49.9 megawatts, that's equivalent to something like 44,600 persons? They are, the population of Morton is about 1,195. So 1,195 people are basically taking the load or the burden to provide 44,000 people with power, green power. To me, that is a huge issue on the size of that solar farm. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. So, obviously, the application has been submitted to the council, and officers have to determine what's put in front of them. And obviously, each case is taking on its own planning merits. Similar to the Wingworth scheme, that was a smaller scheme, and that was dialed down in its size due to the impacts of the green belt and trying to contain it. So this scheme has been put forward. It has a ready grid connection, so there's the pylons going through that site, so that limits maybe the number of sites that are available to the developer. And it also seeks to avoid the more sensitive landscape locations, such as the primary and secondary aims, which we've touched on. So, the applicant has put forward this scheme, and we have to determine it on its own merits. As we've touched on, it's framed by the woodland and the railway, and we believe that the scheme, the benefits outweigh the harm in this instance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any members have any further questions for officers? Councillor Clough, and then Councillor Peterson.
Yeah, Mr Cooper, it may have been a question for the applicant, but did we identify where the 30-metre mast would be going in comparison to the site?
Yeah, I can certainly try and answer that. Hopefully there's somewhere in the officer report that covers that point. So if you look at figure 4 on page 11, and also read that in conjunction with figure 6 on page 38. Actually, there's another figure so figure 7 also shows it. So yeah, if you look at figure 6 and 7 in the officer report on page 38 and 39, so figure 6 shows the existing pylon which runs through the site, and if you look on figure 7, you can see the existing pylon just to the left of the compound at the top of that figure. Can you see that all right? Yeah. So just to the side of that, the mast will then connect into that infrastructure. So the mast in figure 6, everything from the mast to the right hand side is proposed, and that will connect into the existing pylon that's indicated in figure 6 and 7. Is that okay for you, Councillor Clough?
Yeah. I'm just trying to reduce the pylon and then the 30-metre mast, and the effect that that's going to have on the villages surrounding. Obviously, they can see the pylon now, but then a mast added to that is what the detrimental effect that will have on the view.
So the mast is quite narrow, and it has the cables running off it in comparison to the pylon. It's closely aligned to it. It's also to the north of the site, which is close to a band of mature trees and woodland, and it is set some distance away from the right of way. I don't know the exact distance at this moment in time, but I would suggest that it's in excess of 100 metres from the right of way. I expect it's probably quite a bit further than that. So, you know, it'll be seen in the context of the pylon. I don't believe that it will perhaps draw the eye beyond what the pylon does at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson.
Can you explain to me somehow how you get the grading of the land? If you've had somebody with winning awards for agricultural, how does it then end up as being grade 4? Because I can't see that if it's been winning awards for this agriculture, this can't be a grade 4. It's got to be higher, surely.
Thanks, Councillor Peterson. So, yeah, in the officer report, I tried to cover the discussion about the BMV agricultural land, and hopefully I'd hope that would perhaps come through. So the applicant has already said that 24 hectares would be grade 3B land, and the other 41.6 hectares are grade 4. So they've done their own independent assessment to come to that conclusion. We are relying on the DEFRA mapping, which shows that there is some potential grade 3B across that site, and there is it's predominantly grade 4, and I think that comes out in the officer report there. So I think it's still possible that grade 3B and 4 land can still be productive. I'm not saying it's not we're not saying it's not productive. We're just saying that it's not the best and most versatile agricultural land that's available across the country.
Yeah, this is where I get. Sorry, can I? Yeah. This is where I get confused. If he's winning awards for it, I don't see how it can be a lower grade. If he's getting awards, it's got to be much higher than that, surely. I wouldn't have thought you can get awards for winning on low-grade agricultural land.
I said the grading from DEFRA is kind of an overview of that land. So it might be that the land grading is, as it said in the report, is grade 3B and 4, but you can still, due to agricultural practice and the orientation of the land, the layout of the land, how easy it is to manage, you know, you may get a better crop from that land. You know, I don't know, I'm not a farmer, I'm not an expert in that position. I'm just going, officers are kind of driven by the evidence that's before us in the DEFRA mapping and in the evidence that's been put forward in the agricultural report.
Thank you. My life.
Councillor Lacey.
Thank you, Chair. Graham, we heard from one of the speakers that the area of this site is 17% of Moulton. Can you confirm that, please?
Thanks, Councillor Lacey. That is not something I can confirm at the moment. I can try and have a look at that while we.
If you would, please, Graham, it would be appreciated.
Just in respect of that, Chair, I've not done the maths, but from my brief look at the parish boundaries and the site, it would appear that that's a reasonable assessment. It is about 17%, I would say, of the parish.
Thank you, Adrian. Councillor Weatherall.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions, if I may. Would this be the biggest solar farm in North East Derbyshire? And if not, where would it rank? And the second question is about the Highways Authority. Has there been any consideration of the combined effect on highways and the environment of other major infrastructure projects in that area? I'm thinking particularly of National Grid, Severn Trent development proposed. In fact, I think it's been approved, and continued Network Rail works, which is creating significant impact on the environment and may impact highways also. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Weatherall, for that. So whether or not it's the biggest in North East Derbyshire, if it was to be approved, I believe it would be. We've got we've got a handful of schemes that are probably of the 5 megawatt. So we've got 3 to the north of this site. We've also got some at Calo. And we've also approved recently the small one at Wingworth. So we've got that one. But yeah, this would be the biggest in North East Derbyshire. With regards to the Highways Authority, they've taken into account this application at the time when we consulted them. So they would have known about any other infrastructure projects that are in the pipeline that may affect the highway network in this location. So the scheme at Higham, is that the one you referred to? So that's only just come in as an application. So it might be that those two schemes don't overlap in any way, but the Highways Authority believe that there's enough capacity within the road network for the 6 to 9 months that the construction work will take to develop the site. And hopefully I've covered that in the officer report, tried to highlight the anticipated construction traffic movements at figure 9 on page 49.
Can I just add to that, Chair, as well? The members will be aware there's been a variety of applications for solar farms across the district. There's ones, as Graham's mentioned, at Calo, others at Temple Normanton and just north of the A619. I do believe that the one that we've approved at Hasland does achieve a similar kilowattage to this, megawattage to this one, but I think Graham's right, this would rank amongst the highest levels of production that we have in North East Derbyshire.
Councillor Lacey.
Thank you, Chair. Graham, do you believe that the committee would benefit from a physical site visit rather than a virtual in order to make a better decision?
Chair, perhaps come back to you on that. I think that's a matter for you as a planning committee. We believe as officers that we presented you with sufficient information in terms of the site visit that you undertook yesterday, the presentation that Graham's done for you today, and the officer report to provide you with the information that you need to make your decision. However, if you believe that you can only make that decision by physically going out and going to all the various elements of the site that you've heard discussed today, and that is a matter for you, and you need to take that and weigh that up before making your decision. If you feel that you can't, then a site visit may well be the most appropriate way of following that, but it does bring with it other elements that you need to take into account in terms of how you'd undertake that visit and then how you would reconstitute a committee coming back. So they're all matters that Amy may be able to advise on. But if the decision ultimately is for you and the committee chair, if you feel you have all the information to make your decision, then you can move forward this afternoon. If you feel that a site visit is absolutely essential in bringing all those elements together and weighing them, then that will be a matter for yourselves, but that would follow on that then you would undertake that site visit if you feel that is the case.
Thank you for that, Adrian. I think what we'll do, at the moment, we'll carry on with the meeting and see how the debate goes first before we go down that road. Have we got any further questions for officers? No? Is everybody done? Thank you. Do officers have anything they wish to add? No, everything covered. Right, I'm now opening the floor for debate. Councillor Liggett.
Right, I don't really know where to start, but I'll have a go. First of all, I'm going to agree with everything that Councillor Gillett has said. I do know that area. I've been a Shirland resident all my life. I've grown up visiting friends and riding down Evershall Lane, and it is unique. There isn't many parts of Derbyshire that's quite as flat as it is around Evershall Lane, and the views are spectacular and unique. And also, as you said, from the old pit tip, that's a warren of footpaths up there. And I'm afraid when you're up there, you're looking straight down on this beautiful, beautiful landscape. And I really can't imagine anybody wanting to continue using Evershall Lane or the footpaths on the pit tip, looking down on a factory, basically, which is what a solar farm of this size amounts to. I do know Evershall Farm. I did know, I'm going back an awful long time, but it used to be the largest dairy farm in North East Derbyshire, and it was extremely productive. I find it mortifying that the Ramblers Association have actually put it would devastate the area. And I agree with I don't know if it's Mrs. Sarah Barraclough, that it would be a loss of footpaths and bridleway amenity, because I just can't imagine people using it. I know they were saying about the hedges growing up, but would you want to walk through a tunnel when you have been walking, looking at a wide open landscape? I think not. Also, I noticed Rebecca mentioned red kite. They are extremely rare in Derbyshire, extremely. And as far as Mr. White and the toxic tip, I haven't brought it with me, but I have got written evidence from one of those lorry drivers that drove his lorry into Morton Pit and walked out and had to leave the lorry buried. He didn't want to come forward until relatively recently because obviously he was still of working age and don't do so. Now he isn't, and he dare. My auntie was nursing sister at what was the old Morton Hospital, obviously working shifts, and she witnessed this firsthand. I remember her coming back and telling me about all these lorries that were driven in and people walked out. And this driver that I know actually said what he had on his was actually Agent Orange. So that's how dangerous we're talking. I also was a veterinary nurse in a previous life, a long time ago. And when the toxic tick first closed and everybody was walking the dogs on there, before it became the woodland it is now, we had at least 10 dogs die, unexplained, that had been walked on there. That's how dangerous that area is. And I think that's about all I need to say, other than the fact that me personally, I don't think it is acceptable, and I think SDC3, landscape character, just sums up why we shouldn't be passing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. It's a good report, it's well argued and it covers on the planning process. Excellent. But my concern goes back to the size of that solar farm. It is a big farm. Throwing figures around once again, 49.9 megawatts is equal to 25,200 homes. And 500 homes in Morton are carrying this benefit, shall we call it, for that. We should not be going for big, large solar farms. Area of the site, 66 hectares, it's huge. Vast metallic industrial coating the landscape. I'm afraid I'm really, really against the proposal for a large solar farm. Not for a solar farm, but for a large solar farm. So I'm sorry, I don't think I'd be supporting this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Anybody else want to contribute? Well, I will contribute to this then, if no one else is going to say anything. I've been looking at 7.18 of the report, actually, which is the independent landscape advice, was sought and concluded that the immediate landscape character and as a medium value. Although the landscape is not recognised as a value landscape, it is evident from the representations received and that it is highly valued by local residents. And they're here. So, on those grounds, I find this a very difficult proposal. In balance, we're all in favour of solar farms and the production of low-cost renewable energy, but the scale of this on the size of the village of Morton, I think that just outweighs the benefit.
Absolutely.
And I can't support this.
Absolutely. Let's vote.
I'm just going to agree with you, Lee. I think the cumulative effect of what they've got already with the other solar farms is just too much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
Councillor, just like your microphone. And Councillor Gare's on, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the problem here is the scale, isn't it? I mean, I came past a solar farm on Staveley Lane, near Eckington, on my way here, and, you know, it's really bedded in. I mean, you have to sort of look here to see that it's there. But the problem here does seem to be the scale and the proximity to our existing solar farms.
Councillor Weatherall?
Yeah, I agree. And I think just thinking bigger picture, what tends to happen then is that the green agenda loses all credibility because people cannot sign up to it. And I think this is an example of that. Small scale solar farms, but definitely solar panels, PVs on roofs of community buildings, on our public buildings that we own is the way forward. But this is just, it's too industrial and it brings the whole green agenda into disrepute. I can't support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I know we have to be careful on scale of the project, even though it is clearly a very large project. I'd like to bring officers back in on their thoughts on what members are saying here.
Yeah, if I can just make a few comments, Chair, and colleagues may have some other comments they wish to make. But as you've just said, I advise you to be very careful in how much weight you place on the size of this, the scale of it. The issue that you need to weigh is the harm to the landscape and the policies that you have in your development plan in terms of protection or conservation of that landscape against the significant weight to be attached to the delivery of sustainable energy, which is set out in national and to an element in local policy, but it's a very strong push nationally to secure sustainable energy, and this would significantly contribute to that. So I'd urge caution in terms of the size of the farm. That wouldn't, in my opinion, be a strong reason to resist the scheme, but you must consider the landscape impact against the benefits that are clearly set out in the report, and I would ask you to weigh them very carefully because nationally they're achieving great weight. Just in terms of the issue of the size of the scheme compared to the village of Morton, again I would ask you to be very careful how much weight you place on that. The fact that Morton is a village and this scheme would deliver energy in excess of that required by the village, I don't think again would be a strong reason to resist the scheme, because these schemes are varying in size and some are big, some are small, but they don't necessarily then just feed back into the community that they're directly impacted on. So whilst this may be a large scheme and be large in terms of Morton itself, I don't believe again that would be a strong reason for you to resist it. I would urge you again to look at the landscape harm compared with the benefits. And finally, Chair, just in terms of the cumulative impact, the scheme before you does abut up to a scheme as Graham outlined earlier, and in certain long-range views you would view them together. But in terms of the photographs and the virtual visit you undertook yesterday, again I think the way that the two would be perceived together is limited, and the other scheme that you would see it against is small in comparison in terms of size. So the cumulative impact, you should weigh that very carefully, but again, officers' view is that wouldn't be an overriding reason for resisting the scheme. And the other two schemes that lie further to the north are beyond both a tree belt and the railway line, and in officer view you wouldn't see them in direct relationship to the scheme. So I would urge caution on that, Chair, but I would bring you back to the debate that you're having in and around those elements, and the issue that is weighing in the balance for you is the landscape harm compared with the benefits, and officers have weighed that very carefully, and that's set out in our conclusion. In this instance, we believe those benefits outweigh the harm, but that is the judgment ultimately you have to come to this afternoon. Hope that helps, Chair, and colleagues may have other things they wish to say.
I'm just going to bring David Thompson in first.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, largely to back up what Adrian has said, but just to add to it, really. Obviously, in the officer report, we've referred to the issue of the aims, so the area of multiple environmental sensitivity. And it is relevant because it will be a key issue at an appeal, and don't take this as a threat, but it's advice that you need to hear. At an appeal, there will be a critical issue around the fact that the study, the Derbyshire Renewable Energy Study, identifies this as low landscape sensitivity, and that the site is not, the landscape is not designated locally or nationally, and locally it's not designated as either primary or secondary aims. So Adrian obviously is correct, and I'm backing him up in the sense that the landscape impact is still a key issue, but it is important for members to note that in a situation of an appeal, that'll be the first thing that comes back at us, and that isn't to say that there aren't other arguments, but it's a key consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Liggett and then Councillor Clough after.
I'm just going to go back to policy, basically. SDC3, character, quality, distinctiveness, sensitivity of landscape, important features or views. Well, I maintain and tranquility. It is, Evershill Lane is extremely tranquil, and it is a very important view from the top of the old pit tip looking out. And then we've got SS9, policy SS9-2. Development is considered acceptable. It will be required to respect the form, scale and character of the landscape through careful siting, scale design and use of materials. Well, I just can't see that being acceptable in that case, personally. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clough.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm afraid I have to agree with what you said yourself. 7.18 I think covers it. I did put a question mark around it, but I do think the impact is highly valued by the residents of that area, and I think the impact is just too great on the area. I know we can't put any weight on the size, but the impact, 17% of that area is a large area, and the impact to the residents is vast. So I would agree with what you put forward. I would also agree with what Councillor Liggett's put forward as well.
Okay, thank you, members. Anybody else want to contribute? Right, I'm now going to open the floor to motions. Councillor Liggett.
I propose a motion that we go against officers' recommendations.
I second that.
Thank you. Right, we have a motion before us, members.
Just before the vote's taken, could I just ask that if that motion is passed, whether as officers we could agree reasons for refusal with yourself and the Vice Chair before issue, unless members have got other proposals, that would be my suggestion. It just, if members are minded to accept that proposal and refuse the application, that the reasons for refusal are delegated to myself in conjunction and consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee before issue.
Yeah, is everyone happy with that? Right, I'm going to put that to the vote then, and it's going to be on the screen. Okay, that's everyone has voted, and that the application has been rejected. Thank you, members. Yeah. So if members of the public, if you'd like to, if you can leave now, please. We've got a bit of a swap round with members in here now. So. Who voted again? Who voted again? Kristen. Is she? I don't see it. Do members require a comfort break at the minute? It's quite long. Yeah. We'll resume again in about 5. In about Right, we'll move on, members. We're now moving on to item 6, which is NED stroke 24 stroke 00781 /FL Ashover. The first application is, sorry, the second application is in respect of Butts Quarry at Ashover. I'm now going to hand you over to Adrian Kerncombe, the planning officer, who's going to give us a brief explanation of the application.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Firstly, if I can refer members to the late updates report that was issued yesterday, just a couple of elements on that. First of all, to note the comments of the footpath bodies who've made comment on that element, and also in respect of the front of the committee report in respect of the third-party representations, and to ask you to note that the report is otherwise correct in reporting those, other than at the start of paragraph 5.2, the 4 should be 14. And in addition, Chair, I've received final comments from the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust this morning, and in short, the additional information that's been submitted by the applicants addresses the comments that were originally made by the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, and so now no objection is raised to the application by the Trust, subject to the imposition of the necessary conditions. Before I go through a few slides, Chair, I would like to, by way of introduction, just say a few words. The application, Chair, is made up of a number of elements, as members will be aware. There is the proposed conversion of a building to a dwelling, the construction of 3 holiday lodges, the construction of a building and refurbishment of an existing structure to form a reception area to serve the holiday lodges, and for occasional use as a facility to be used in connection with a motocross use. There's the formation of hard stood areas for parking and turning, and specifically permission is sought for 14 days for use of the site for motocross purposes. The site, Chair, as we saw yesterday on the site visit, is part of the wider Butts Quarry. It's accessed off Butts Road, crisscrossed by various rights of way, and lies within a primary area of multiple environmental sensitivity, representing the most attractive and sensitive landscapes of North East Derbyshire. The building that would be converted was subject of a similar application in 2017. The primary difference between that and this proposal is in respect of the extensions that were proposed in 2017, whereas now none are intended, and that's as shown in figure 10 of the officer report. The 2017 application was refused and subsequently dismissed on appeal. The site, in the view of officers, exhibits the same characteristics as in 2017, and so officers have taken the view that the conclusions of the inspector then remain valid. 3 triangular-styled holiday lodges are proposed, measuring in excess of 9 metres high when measured from ground level. Officers do not consider that in association with the formal areas around them that they reflect the character of the area or preserve the experience of those using the public footpaths that pass directly by them, or retain the dark skies as sought specifically by the neighbourhood plan. The cafe building that's proposed would occupy a location where historically a cafe associated with the former Ashover Light Railway stood. As set out in the report, Chair, officers don't place a great deal of weight on the historical significance of that building as set out in the application, and consider it would add to detraction from the character of the site. The parking areas that are proposed, Chair, also add to officer concerns. The motocross use of the site currently operates under planning permitted development rights and under a noise abatement notice that's been served by the council. In some form, it could operate under planning permitted development rights for up to 28 days. Notwithstanding that, Chair, there is, in the view of officers, no policy support for the use, and if permitted, there are likely to be issues in seeking to control it acceptably. Issues regarding trees and ecology have been resolved, as have those in respect of all other technical matters. But overall, Chair, officers don't consider that any element of the proposal in its current form is acceptable, and so as a whole the application is recommended for refusal. I do have a few slides that I'll go through, Chair, just in order. First of all, the application site that we saw yesterday, and in closer up form you can make out the 2 buildings that are on the site, one in the top northwest corner and one towards the centre of the site. The one in the centre of the site is the rectangular building I referred to that would form part of a refurbished building then in association with the cafe building. The application site, Chair, edged in red, and you can see the two buildings again, one in the top northwest section and one in the central area. The additional building above and outside the red line site is a building that was granted planning consent in 2016 to assist in the maintenance of the land. In closer up form, Chair, the orange area is the converted building and its associated domestic curtilage. The three lodges in the southwest corner of the site, along with their associated paths, steps and areas that would surround them. The cafe reception building in the centre of the site, and then in yellow, the hard stud areas. This is the conversion that's referred to in the report, Chair, and you can see there the glazed front, the chimney, the solar panels, etc., that are referred to in the officer report. And that's the curtilage area and its associated parking again that's referred to in the officer report. This is the submitted plans in respect of the three lodges. As you can see, the triangular in form with the glazed frontage, and there are pictures set out in the officer report showing the buildings as envisaged on site. And that's the location of those buildings, Chair, along with the areas associated with them, the hedgerows and planting, and then the paths and steps that would access the access tracks. This is the cafe building and the reception area. The refurbished building is the rectangular building that would be, I say, refurbished and upgraded, and then the building that would be associated with them, the hexagonal building, is the cafe building formerly associated, I understand, with the Ashover Light Railway. And then finally, Chair, the hard stud areas in yellow. And just a few aide-memoire photographs from yesterday, Chair. This is the building that would be subject of the conversion. This is just an example of where the lodges would sit on the raised platforms, and this photograph is taken from the right-of-way that runs adjoining to them, showing how the track would be accessed through the steps that are shown on the submitted drawings. And again, Chair, the level areas where the lodges would sit. This is the rectangular building and the area where the cafe building would be located, on that flat area to its left. I think finally, Chair, just a picture showing the existing site entrance, and to the right of the tracks there and the gate there would be the hard stud areas where the parking areas would be formed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian. Right, we have 5 speakers on this application. The first one being Councillor Weatherall. You have 3 minutes when you're ready, over. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Having called this scheme into committee, I now have no hesitation in supporting it. And there are 3 things I'd like to cover, the 3 C's: consistency of decision making, common sense and community. Firstly, consistency of decision making. Planners and committee recently approved a very similar scheme at Far Hill Quarry in Ashover, a brand new home in a quarry that's a site of special scientific interest. And Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy promised to be custodians of this special environment. Mr. and Mrs. Dring's scheme is exactly the same. They wish to be custodians of Butts Quarry. The same planning policies apply to both schemes equally. Common sense. Planners are concerned about the previous planning inspectorate appeal more than 7 years ago in 2017, but this is a brand new scheme because track days have been reduced from 28 to 14 and will remain as 14 per year. Bikes taking part are now a different technical spec and quieter. Track days are now enduro, not racers. Holiday accommodation is now included. The dwelling is on the footprint of the existing barn with no extension. There will be reinstatement of a heritage building, the Rainbow's End Cafe, which has substantial social historic value, and there is additional economic benefit for the community. The proposed residence is not now for convenience, as stated by the inspector, but is an economic necessity. Much has changed in 8 years. COVID, Ukraine, cost of living crisis. The context now is very different. The high-end design of the lodges means they will be an attractive, welcome addition to the Ashover tourist economy. The new gravel pathways will make it easier to walk across the site in wet weather with 2 dogs, as I do. Reinstatement of the historic cafe returns a heritage building intact and in its original shape, size and position. Great interest will be generated for light railway enthusiasts nationally and internationally by this building alone. The track has been in regular use for 60 years. My dad used to go, and my brothers. Granting planning consent should be a formality. Finally, community. There are no objections from any of the statutory consultees, and our community is fully behind the scheme because it reinstates an important heritage building with historic links to both Ashover and Claycross, and there is considerable public interest in this. It secures the future of the track, which is also part of the heritage of Ashover for the last 60 years, and it sustains the environment of Butts Quarry for the future. The Drings have shown over the past 10 years that they are more than worthy custodians of this important Ashover site, and the community will support them in any way we can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do members have any questions for Councillor Weatherall? Right, no, thank you. Would you like to retake your seat? Right, the next speaker on this application is Edward Wilmot from Ashover Parish Council. You have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of Ashover Parish Council. I chaired the meetings whereby we looked at the application, and I do have to say that it was a unanimous decision amongst the councillors to accept in total the application as it stood. It felt for many reasons that the application would support the local economy, and after COVID, I can assure you the hospitality parts of the village and the community really do need that sort of economy held. This would also, for many reasons, support the heritage of the parish. It will support in terms of the light railway, in terms of other factors. We get a lot of educational interest in the area. We get people studying hydrology, and within that site there is a Order 1 river and an Order 2 river for them to study. I'm talking about university levels and A level. There's a lot of geography in there, there's the geology, and people that come in, often students, would probably want to stay overnight. There is nowhere to stay. We have very, very limited amount of hostel situation within the village and in the local community. In terms of its support, the Parish Council does have a website. We do have an Ashoverville Facebook, and there has been 0 comment as a negative. They have all been positive to support this application. In terms of furthering the, shall we say, the proposed application, we have trustees on site, the owners of the site, that have proved themselves taking it from what was probably, I wouldn't say derelict, but quite an untidy site to bring it to what you see today. I'm not talking about manicuring, I'm talking about keeping it in a rural aspect, and I think they've gone every mile. So the capability of the people concerned is certainly there. And I think that's gone a long way in terms of the Parish Council's support for what they intend to do. There's a footpath that leads up to a place called Hatewood on the opposite side of the river. that's been made accessible, which was at one time was totally inaccessible because of its steepness. Efforts have been made by the ownership to make that available for people to use in a proper manner, and people probably less able to move than some of us are. The cafe, known as the Rainbow's End Cafe, started its life in the Quarry with the light railway. It was moved to Clay Cross, so we have a terrific affinity with Clay Cross. And I can remember on Good Fridays we had up to 200 people walking from Clay Cross to Ashover. I'm going back now into the 70s, 60s and 70s, but that generates the sort of affinity that the local community of Clay Cross has with Ashover. It was their side. They came for recreation. This has taken it one step further forward when it is being
You've had
made
your 3 minutes. Are you just summing up? Have you got much?
In conclusion,
Yeah.
the ward members supported, the parish council supported, the outside area supported. I find it very hard for any planning committee to say negative.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions? Can you just...
Mr. Wilmot, sorry, I've got a question. I've got a question.
Sorry about that.
Am I right in saying that the Six Holts pub, as in Clay, the newish one in Clay Cross, was named something? That was something to do with Ashover Light Rail, wasn't it?
It was one of the. There were 6 stations that were called halts, dotted on its way through the bottom of Ogston Reservoir is now actually through to Clay Cross, and the 6 halts, yes, took its name from that. The first halt being only about a mile down, but the story goes you could jump off the train, pick flowers and get back on it again. I do remember it as a very young child going in there to pick coal up. So it was an industrial site, and obviously what you've said supports all that, and the heritage is there.
Thank you. No further questions? Right. The next speaker is Michael Lawton, a supporter of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I'm speaking on behalf of the Ashover Light Railway Society. The Society fully supports the whole scheme, and we are very excited about the opportunity for the Rainbow's End Cafe to rebuild where it was originally, nearly 100 years ago. This is the first time the Society have been presented with a realistic opportunity to resurrect the cafe, and despite it having spent several years as a meeting place in Clay Cross, it is now currently in storage at our workshop. Its rightful place is back home in Butts Quarry, where our wish is for it to serve as a monument to the Ashover Light Railway Society and the Ashover Light Railway. It's very disheartening that the case officer has not acknowledged the importance of the industrial significance and heritage of the cafe. It's easy to see why Butts Quarry would have been such an attraction in the heady days of the Ashover Light Railway, when people from surrounding areas travelled to the village to enjoy their quiet getaway, at the heart of which was the cafe. As co-chair of the Society, and with our railway celebrating 100 years since its official opening, this scheme would be the icing on the cake. The large amount of local community interest at our centenary exhibition early this year was fantastic, from discussions with people who travelled on the railway or ventured into the cafe, to the young children who were keen to learn more about this significant piece of cultural local history. The cafe would be rebuilt in the exact location it was previously sited, therefore negating comments regarding impact on the footpaths. The additional buildings included in the application serve as a form of security for the cafe building, which would be vulnerable to vandalism without a human presence. We feel the environmental impact of this scheme would be negligible across the whole quarry area. The proposed interpretation boards will give the opportunity to display photographs and information about the building and the site, acting as a local information hub, which walkers in particular may enjoy to read about the history. During my time at many local shows in Ashover, Woolly Moor and Cromford Steam Rally and the like, the most frequent question I am asked is, what is happening with where the Rainbow's End Cafe? It would be a huge achievement for me to be able to say that it will be brought back to its home. Conversely, it would be so disheartening and disappointing to have to say that we were unable to achieve our charitable aims and let down the community by saying that the only opportunity we had to bring back the cafe building has been rejected by our local council. The Ashover Light Railway Society strongly supports the whole scheme, enabling our cafe to be reinstated in its rightful place. Please approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? I'd like to ask, when did the railway close?
1950. That's when it stopped operations. There were bits of it that laid around following that, but it was all sent off for scrap in the end.
When was it dismantled?
It was in the mid-70s to 80s that it was completely dismantled.
Right.
But 1950 was when it stopped running.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. If you'd like to retake your seat, thank you. Right, the next speaker is Barry Dring, the applicant.
Hello, I am Barry. I've owned Butts Quarry for 10 years. The reason we are here is to try and prevent our bike track that has been running for 60 years from closing. We are struggling to remain viable due to the restrictions of a noise abatement notice which has been in place for 2 years. We have had several meetings with senior officers who confirmed they don't want us to see the bike facility close. South Yorkshire Police Off-Road Team also support our track, expressing their serious concerns over closing this type of venue and the implications. We first applied to convert the barn 7 years ago to live on site after we had been subjected to £42,000 worth of criminal damage. Being able to live on site for management, maintenance and security purposes is vital. I am hopeful you will be able to look at this application afresh because the bike activity has changed dramatically following the conditions of the abatement notice. It is important to note that the appeal inspector conclusions related to the track activity prior to the abatement notice. We lost 70% of our running time and can now only open 14 times a year instead of 28, and bikes run for a total of 5 hours, 10 till 3 p.m. This means there are no longer any motocross race meetings. These by far have the biggest noise impact. Motocross bikes are significantly noisier and are no longer allowed on site without an enduro type silencer that is road legal. I can't stress strongly enough that the bike track is fundamentally different to the way it operated at the time of our previous appeal. Our research confirms that holiday lets within this beautiful location would be an asset to Ashover and will supplement our lost income. We made it clear to officers that we were very happy to discuss the design of the lodges. Our family lodges have been intentionally designed to bring a unique holiday experience to North East Derbyshire. We didn't want to bring more standard timber lodges. We have lots of those and we want to provide something different. The lodges are not multi-storey as stated at 7.17. They are single-storey with a mezzanine deck for a bed. We had been overwhelmed by support from Ashover for this scheme to keep our track open. This application is fundamentally different to any other schemes for our site. It is especially important to note there has been no objection from Environmental Health Officer. This would not be the case if they were still concerned about the noise. We really hope you will be able to see what we are trying to achieve with this comprehensive scheme. We ask you to please support us, keeping our much-needed bike track open, bringing back the historic cafe building to its original home, promoting tourism and ensuring the continued upkeep of this beautiful quarry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dring. Do members have any questions? Yep, if you'd like to retake your seat, please. Thank you. The next speaker is Charlotte Stainton, the agent.
Thank
You've
you.
got 3 minutes when you're ready. Thank you.
This comprehensive scheme has 4 main elements: a barn conversion, continuation of 14 days backtrack, 3 holiday lodges and reinstatement of the cafe. Conversion. There are dozens of barn conversions approved in North East Derbyshire. This conversion of a stone barn with no extensions is fundamentally different to the one considered on appeal. It now fully complies with your conversion policies. In June last year, I obtained consent for a stone barn conversion within 1 mile of Butts Quarry. Due to concern about potential noise and odour from cattle, that conversion was approved with a condition that requires it to be occupied only by persons working at the site. A similar condition could be imposed here if there is still concern about the bike track. Reason for refusal 1 does not reflect the submitted details. The bike track. Barry has just explained why the bike track is substantially different to the previous scheme, not least because the days have reduced by half, the maximum hours are 10 till 3, and silencers are used. There have been no noise complaints since agreement was reached with Environmental Health. The motocross can continue using permitted development rights, so specific refusal of this part of the scheme is illogical. It is also very relevant to note that, unlike previously, reason for refusal 3 is not supported by Environmental Health, who are content that the noise issues have been resolved. Holiday lodges. Only 3 holiday lodges are proposed. This is a substantially smaller scale than many of the holiday ventures approved across the district. Jenny and Barry wish to make their site viable by providing a unique holiday experience, not just more timber chalets. Some of their guests will be interested in using the bike track, and others will wish to stay when the track is closed. We think the return of the cafe, including the heritage boards, is something to be celebrated. It is very rare that local heritage assets can be reinstated once they are removed. Mike has explained the benefits of this, and reason for refusal 2 has been addressed. Footpaths. There are hundreds of examples of public rights of way crossing private land, including holiday parks, golf courses and working farms. The Footpath Society have withdrawn their initial concerns, and reason for refusal 4 has been addressed. In conclusion, there are no objections from any of your statutory consultees, and the local support has been overwhelming. There are numerous planning policies that support this scheme. There are policies in favour of enhancement of the rural economy, as well as the provision of recreation opportunities. National policy stresses this is important for health and well-being. Policies also support developments which would secure the future of a heritage asset. There is so much more that I could say, and we ask you please to support this exciting project for North East Derbyshire. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? I've got one question, but just regarding our local plan and our local policies. Can you explain to us what policy we're looking at for the use of motocross vehicles?
Sure, there's no specific policy about motocross vehicles. There are numerous policies that relate to development in the countryside and the provision of recreation activities in the countryside. The policies are listed on page 81 of your report. I didn't want to just read out a list of policies in my speech, else we would have been here even longer. Ashover Neighbourhood Plan is supportive of the rural economy and reusing the redundant building in their policy AP2. AP7 relates to new small-scale employment opportunities. That's also a neighbourhood plan policy. The local plan policies relate to development in the countryside is SS9, visitor and tourism development at WC5, lodges in the countryside at WC6, reuse and conversion of buildings is SDC1. Particularly in terms of the recreation use, I'd draw your attention to paragraph 103 of the National Planning Policy Framework, as well as paragraphs 88 and 210 of the NPPF, which relate to the rural economy and heritage assets.
Thank you. Any other members have any questions? No, if you'd like to retake your seat.
Thank you.
Right then, members, it's Now time to ask questions of officers. Have we got any questions for officers? Councillor Jones.
Adrian, looking at the scope of the application itself, there are basically 3 areas. Is it possible for the committee to remove one of them, remove the lodges from a decision? So we could say no to that and yes to the rest? Is that possible?
Andrew may have something to say about this, Chair, but in this instance, I would have said that the 3 elements, the 3 built elements of the scheme are roughly similar in scale. So there's the 3 lodges, the cafe building and the dwelling house. My view would be that it would be inappropriate in this case to remove one of those by condition. If there was purely a very small element of it that was unacceptable to you, you could do that by condition. But with them being of this commensurate level, I don't think it would be appropriate to do so. Just in that instance, if the lodges were the only element that were unacceptable to the committee, then you may be minded just to refuse the application on that basis. The other option that you would have, and again Andrew may have thoughts about this, if you wished the issue of the 3 lodges to be reassessed by officers in conjunction with the applicant, you could defer the application with specific instruction on what element you would wish to see amended, and we could seek to negotiate a different outcome on that element with the applicants. But I've not discussed that with the applicant. I don't know how amenable they would be, and you heard what Mr. Dring said about that element of it. But I don't think in this instance it would be appropriate to limit that element of the scheme by condition, unless Andrew disagrees. That would be my thoughts on that, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Councillor Liggett.
The only thing that I noticed, one of the objections from the officers was parking, hard standing. And I just wondered if you could have a condition hexa-web down instead of stone or hard standing.
The issue about the hard standing and the turning and parking areas is particularly in respect of their proximity to the site access, and I appreciate why that is the case. But they would be a prominent element of the scheme as you enter it. You would see potentially parked cars and a hard standing area where currently you see greenery. If the issue of concern only to members was the finish of that area rather than what's been parked on top of it, you could condition grasscrete or I apologise, I can't remember what you called it, Councillor. Yeah. As opposed to the more formal chippings that are proposed at the moment. So you could condition that specifically if that was a particular issue and concern to you.
Right, I'm just going to bring Andrew in to answer Adrian's question on the legalities of...
Thanks, Jay. Yes, I think essentially Adrian did set out all the bits that was an option for you in terms of how to remove the element of the lodges. So I think they were the best ones really going forward, and they're the most practical. So yeah, I'd just agree with that. So they're the options really that for you to go forward on that point.
Thank you.
Any other members got any questions? I've got one question for officers. I'm just looking at Mr. Ring raised this actually during his speech. Permission was refused for alterations and conversion to a stone barn to a manager's dwelling in 2017, I believe. Is this substantially different to that application? Not with, obviously not taking the lodges, because obviously they're in, been brought into this application, but how much difference is between that refused application that obviously went to appeal, lost at appeal, to what we've got in front of us now?
Well, you'll have noted what Mr. Ring and others have said about the change in the motocross use. I'm not afraid I'm not a aficionado of how motorcycles work, so I apologise I can't comment on that, how that may have changed over the past 8 years. But primarily the difference is that the building that would be converted no longer has any extensions proposed to it. And that did form part of the appeal scheme that was dismissed. So there were 2 extensions that came off the front of the building. That's primarily the difference.
So it's substantially smaller than what was applied for in 2017?
The building that would be converted is the same, but the extensions wouldn't be part of that. So it would be a smaller dwelling that would result.
Mm-hmm. Right. And does it meet any requirements now that those alterations have been?
In terms of the extension, alteration or reconstruction element of your conversion policy, it would be more aligned with that than it was back in 2017, yes, because there are no extensions that are proposed. It's purely simply seeking the conversion of the existing building rather than any addition to it.
Right, and just with regard to the motocross, how much could we rely on putting conditions on the application if we were to accept that element of the application?
As discussed by officers in the report, Chair, if you grant a specific permission for the scheme, you are, through planning consent, taking some ownership and control of it, and it's how you would then impose conditions or otherwise on any consent granted. The issue that there is at the moment, as was discussed, I think Charlotte mentioned it, the site can operate for up to 28 days under planning permitted development rights. So that is a planning right rather than a noise abatement notice right. The noise abatement notice is the manner in which the council restricts the use to the 14 days, and that's an environmental health element of works rather than a planning element of work. So it's a different arm of the regulatory body of the council that's controlling the 14 days and how that facility operates. We as planners are not noise experts nor motorcycle experts, so I think the problem that you would have as a planning authority is controlling that activity and limiting it in a way that is something that from a planning point of view you can control. And I'm not sure if you were minded to grant permission for the scheme and therefore the motocross use, I'm sure you would want to control it in some form, but how that would be done, I'm not clear I can advise you here, Chair. The issue could be that as a council you could withdraw the noise abatement notice tomorrow if you wished as a council, and this is set out in case law. That would then leave you as local planning authority controlling the motocross use, and if it was deemed to be unacceptable, as has been the case in the past, then it would be the local planning authority that would be looked to do that, and that would create issues, I think, from a planning point of view. It's not insurmountable, but you would take on ownership and responsibility of that. And as I say, I think as Charlotte mentioned, the site could operate under 28 days permitted development in any case, so I'm unclear as to how that benefits the site in terms of the future use and activity on the site, Chair. So in short, yes, it can be done, but I think that raises issues for the council's local planning authority in terms of potential enforceability of those conditions going forwards.
Right.
Hopefully that final paragraph, Chair, answers your question.
Yeah.
The rest of it hopefully helps in understanding.
Right, okay. Any further questions from officers? Councillor Leggett? No? Oh, right. I could see you poised. Right, I'll open the floor for debate. Right. Councillor Leggett. Surprisingly enough.
Ashover is, I know Ashover well, I spend an awful lot of time there, I'll be honest with you. We use their shop as our local shop, if you like, and I'm pretty certain that the 2 cafes, the shop, the butchers and the 3 public houses would be very grateful of the tourism. So personally I wouldn't want to be removing the lodges, and 3 lodges are not a lot in the scheme of things in a quarry that size. And also I thought it was very emotional from a history buff point of view to reintroduce the Rainbow's End Cafe. I found quite emotional, to be honest, because it's so rare that you get the chance to bring something back. in this world that's been taken away. And it's also interesting to know that Ashover had a very small but an industrial past as well as a farming community. Also, Ashover, as you drive into Ashover, underneath the Ashover sign, they have a little motto, if you like, and it says community first. And I think today has just summed that up, the fact there's been no objections. And they are quite a vocal village. They get the villagers of Ashover get involved in everything that's going. And as Mr. Wilmot said, they've had no objections on the parish council website, which is quite amazing when you think about it, really. And that's about it, I think. Thank you.
Chair, can you just make one factual point,
Yes.
please? I apologise for coming in, but there hasn't been no objections. There've been the two objections that we've received. So it's never a popularity contest, but just to correct that point. Yeah.
Right, anybody else wishing to contribute? Councillor Cooper.
I'd just like to basically support what my colleague just said. I mean, it feels like a scheme that's made ready and has some historical background to it that gives something back, and the support of the village says possibly everything you need to hear. I would say that on a very slight note, that the thing that did concern me a little bit was where the vehicles parked and how they manoeuvred, and the way and possibly how they affected the site as you went into it. So I would like to see, if this is passed, I would like to see something done about that, and about the grass, or the scree in the grass, or whatever it is, to try and avoid that harsh look as you look at the site. That would affect it for me on a small scale, but on a large scale, I think it's an excellent application, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Anybody else? Well, I'm going to contribute then. That seems to be down to me to say something. I'm 50-50 with this application. I agree with some of it, and I think there's parts of it that I don't like. And I think Councillor Jones touched on it earlier, which is the lodges. It's not that I'm against the lodges being on site or having some holiday accommodation on site. It is the design of those lodges and the way, and we're in the area is supposed to, according to the local plan, the neighbourhood plan, sorry. There's supposed to be a dark sky area, and I don't think those with the big glass front, the lodges like as they are, really go in line with that policy of the neighbourhood plan. So I'm 50-50 with it. It's one of those applications where I like parts of it. I like to see, obviously, that we've got the chance for more tourism coming to the area. We'll want economic development. So, but there are just elements of it I'm not sure of. Councillor Cooper.
Okay, Chair. What I would say in relation to that is that the neighbourhood plan that's Ashover Parish Council, is that correct? And they've supported this scheme. So I'm a little bit unclear as a member, planning member, how that decision is to be weighted, because although what you've just said is in the plan, Ashover Parish Council have gone against their own plan.
Okay,
so if somebody can give me some advice on that might be helpful.
Councillor Leggett.
I think it says that there's no external lighting. So although the glass fronted, there's no outside light, and there's no light pointing upwards, like skylights or anything like that. So I'm just thinking, is it any different to house windows in the village?
I can read out the policy if you'd like. The policy in terms of dark skies from the neighbourhood plan says Any development must limit the impact of light pollution from artificial, externally visible light sources. Any proposals to install lighting in areas of the parish that are currently dark at night will be resisted. Dark at night is defined as more than 50 metres from an existing street light.
Thank you for that point of clarification, Adrian. Right, does anybody else want to contribute? Councillor Peterson.
I actually like the design of those. I think they fit in very well with the actual look of the quarry. But I am concerned about, as you say, the glass front, and I'm sure we ought to be able to do something about that, can't we, in conditions or something? I don't know.
Is that a question for Adrian?
Yes.
The only, and again, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, the only way I believe you can perhaps address that, if you're otherwise happy with the design of the scheme, is seek to have, by condition, seek an alternative design to the frontage of those buildings that are less glazed. So I think you could do it that way, and then it would be for the applicant to either agree something with the council, they could appeal the condition if they felt it ultimately unacceptable. So if that was the only element of the scheme as a whole that was of concern to you, I think you could limit that by condition, seeking a redesign. So it would retain the height and the design and the scale, etc. It would just mean that frontage would need to have a more closed-in frontage. If it's not very good use of words, but a lesser glazed frontage.
Right. Any further? Nobody wants to add anything more? No? Right. We'll now open the floor to motions. Councillor Liggett? Yeah.
I propose that we go against officers' recommendations and pass it with the conditions that we, the frontage issue, if people are worried about the lighting, and possibly the introduction of hexi-web, if that's what it's called, instead of the stone parking.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clough. Right, we have a motion before us.
Chair, just
yes.
again, apologise for this.
Come on in, Adrian.
If you're minded to accept that motion, Chair, to approve the scheme, would be grateful if you'd either delegate conditions to myself in consultation with yourself and the Vice Chair, or even better than that, say anything that you would like to add in other than the redesign of the frontage that we would include within that. But they would follow certain things that have been set out of the application, such as tying the building to be converted to the land, seeking to control the motocross use appropriately to planning, controlling the use of the cafe building to what's set out in the application. So I think there's been some misunderstanding between those who've commented on the application and the applicant in terms of its use. It would be a reception area and use only for the motocross facility. That's what's set out in the application, so to control it. So it would be those controls, Chair, that I would seek to agree with yourself and the Vice Chair. So,
okay. Thank you for that, Adrian. Right, well, we do have a motion on the floor to go against officer decision. We're putting that to the vote. Yeah. Is it coming? Right, that's 9 in favour and 2 abstentions. That has passed. I think somebody's happy. Yeah. Right, members, we're just going to wait for the chamber to clear, and then we'll move on on the agenda? Right, members, we'll move on. Item 8 on the agenda is planning appeals. I'll now ask the officers to run through the next report. Appeals lodged and determined. So over to you, Adrian.
I was just going to comment very briefly, Chair, on the 3 appeals that have been determined in the past month, and they are there have been 3 that have been dismissed. 2 relate to the same property, and those at Bluebell Woods Cottage relate to the design primarily of an extension in the Greenbelt, and the inspector made some interesting comments in respect of the extension to the building, and in this instance considered it not disproportionate, therefore not inappropriate, but considered the heritage value of the group of buildings in which it would be situated and its design was unacceptable. So quite an interesting view on Greenbelt policy and in terms of heritage, Chair. The Mr Cooper scheme at Morton, again, makes interesting reading in terms of the inspector's view on that. It was a development that stood partly within and partly outside a settlement development limit in close proximity to other listed buildings, and the inspector made great play of the impact on the character of the area, but also on the heritage assets, and also made a brief comment about the council's 5-year housing land supply, and that will be something that you will need to consider going forwards. But as of the start of April, the inspector concluded that whilst on a knife edge the council did have its 5-year supply, and therefore took the view that that wasn't overriding in any other case. So again, makes interesting reading, Chair, and as always I'd commend the appeal decisions to all members of the committee. It's a good way of understanding how inspectors, when taking all other things out of the equation, consider your policies and the national policies in context. So any questions, Chair, I'll take, but other than that, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
And excuse me, do members have any questions on the report? No? So we'll agree to just note that report. Can you just show of hands? Thank you. Right, I have item 9. I have no urgent business. So I now declare the meeting closed. And thank you everyone for attending.